You may have seen those really well edited viral reels on Instagram, the ones that get posted by accounts like Kold, Bart VFX, and some other creators as well. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how you can actually create these 3D viral reels in Adobe After Effects. I will walk you through the whole process from start to finish, and specifically, I'm going to be showing you guys how I created this Kold style reel in Adobe After Effects.
Why is social media so addictive? Social media companies pay software developers and programmers huge amounts of money to keep you hooked on their platform for as long as possible.
Also, just a quick mention, if you are a beginner or intermediate video editor looking to level up and edit like a professional as soon as possible, then I would highly recommend that you check out my video editing product skill cut through the top link in the description below. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new composition. I'm going to name mine 3D Reels Tutorial. Also make sure that the width and height of the composition is 1080 by 1920 pixels. So YouTube is 1920 by 1080 and TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts is 1080 by 1920. Also, I'm not 100% sure what assets I'm going to be using for this. I'm kind of going to make it up a bit as I go along. But what I'll do is I will link in the description below like all of the assets which I used for this to create this like reel. But for now, I'm only going to import one or two of the assets and I'll add them into the composition or into the project as we go along. Then I'm going to create a new solid. It's going to be a black solid. And I'm just going to import this like spotlight overlay. Then I'm going to scale it down so it fits the rest of the composition. And I'm going to change the opacity of it to 25. Then I'm going to add this grid overlay. I'm going to set the rotation to 90. And I'm going to add it below the spotlight. Then I'm going to search up in the effects and presets tint, and I'm going to add that onto the grid. I'll map black to white, and I'll map white to black, and this will swap the colors. And then I'm going to change the opacity of this grid to 12%, and I'll create a new adjustment layer. And on this adjustment layer, I'll add the vignette effect onto it. And I'm going to increase it and just increase it to like 126, maybe 116, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to create a new camera, and I'm going to turn off enable depth of field. You can follow the rest of my settings. I think I've basically just got the default ones, but just make sure it's also one node camera, then press OK. And then I'm going to create a new null object, and then I'm going to make this null object 3D, and I'll make all the other layers below it 3D as well. And then I'll add the null like below the camera one, and I'll parent link the camera one to the null one. Then I'm going to import most of my assets. I'm just going to import pretty much all of them. And firstly, I'm going to import the voiceover, which I forgot to import earlier. So this is just like this AI voiceover that I made.
Why is social media so addictive?
It's just for the sake of this video. I just made it with a AI voice. So like, yeah, you can also find the link to this in the description below if you want to edit the exact same voiceover. Now I'm happy with the background. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding in the icons. So I'm going to import the TikTok logo, and I'm going to put it below the null and the camera. I'll make it 3D, and I'll scale it down and just position it where I want it to be. Then I'm also going to import this Instagram logo as well, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'll scale it down. I'll position it where I want it to be. And then I will also just like, I'm actually just going to play around with all of them. So because they need to all match, I'm trying to create this like triangle. So and then I'll import the third one, which is the Facebook one, and I also add this to the triangle. As you can see, like there's like the TikTok one on the left, the one at the top, so it's almost forming this like triangle thing. And I'm also going to make sure that all three of these icons are 3D. Then I'm just going to move them all down so they're centered, and I'm just going to try and make sure everything's positioned right as well. Then I'm going to add a position keyframe at the start on the camera one, and I'm just going to scale out with the third value. And this third value, it may seem like it's the scale, because when you use it, it will look like things are scaling in and out. But what it's doing is, because this is a 3D camera, what it's doing is it's essentially moving the actual camera closer and further away from what's in shot. And then the first two values are just like left, right, up and down. The main thing when it comes to the camera movement is this closer and further away thing. But we will be using all three of these values pretty much equally, because yeah, I'm not just going to be going like closer and further away. I'm going to be going to the left and the right just to create that real like 3D look. So now what I'm going to do, yeah, is I'm just going to scale it out to, and then everything's around here. And I am going to then search up in the effects and presets motion tile. And the reason why I'm going to add this motion tile effect is because the background, as you can see, it runs out. And once you like run out of background, it just shows the black solid behind it, or the black composition. We could scale in the whole background and this would fit the rest of the screen, but the problem is then we lose like the cubes look more zoomed in, you lose the quality as well. Everything just doesn't look right, and you don't want to do this. So the better and easier option and the most effective option is just to add the motion tile effects onto the layers that you want to expand, like I'm going to do now to the black solid one. I'm going to increase the output width to 500 and the output height to 500 as well. I'm also going to enable mirror edges, and I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add it onto all of the background layers. And as you can see now, everything's filling out. Now I'm going to go forward by around 1.5 seconds and I'm going to add another position keyframe for the camera. Then I'm going to go back to the original one, and I'm also going to add a Z rotation keyframe for that. And then I'm going to go forward to the second keyframe and I'll add another Z rotation keyframe as well. So now we have 4 keyframes. I'll go back to the first one and I'm going to rotate it to like +20. Then I'm going to highlight these keyframes. I'll press F9 to ease them. Then I'm going to go into the graph editor to play around with the graph and create a steep peak at the start like so, and as you can see it rotates quite smoothly, but we haven't scaled it in, so we're going to go to the second set of keyframes and we're just going to zoom in closer, so and then the camera is now closer to the icons. And actually what I want to do instead of starting off tilted and then going to straight, what we're going to do is we're going to start off straight and then we're going to tilt it. So I'm going to change the first Z rotation to 0, and I'm going to go to the second position, like the Z rotation keyframe, and I'll make it positive like 20, something like that. And as you can see, it's like this, but now we're also going to move all 3 of the icons, so now they're in the middle. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all 3 of the icons, and I'm just going to change the Z rotation on them, so now they're straight. So now the background is tilted, but the icons are straight. Now I'm also just going to play around with the position of them, so and then they're back in that like nice triangle shape like so. If we play this back, as you can see now, it like tilts in like so. And if you've done it right with the graphs, it should look really smooth. Then we're going to search up in the effects and presets glow, and we're going to add this glow effect onto the icon. So I'm going to add it to the Instagram one first. I'll increase the glow radius to the max, and I'll decrease the glow intensity to like 0.7. Then I'm going to copy it and I'm going to add it onto the TikTok one, but I'm going to adjust the settings because it doesn't really look the same as the Instagram. So what I'm going to do is I'll make it full like resolution so we can see properly, and I'm going to like basically play around with all of the like, you know, the threshold, like with the radius and the intensity, so and it looks quite similar to the Instagram one. And then I'm also going to add a glow onto the Facebook one, and I'm just going to increase that to the max, and I'm going to change the intensity to like 0.8. Now I'm going to keyframe the position at the start of all 3 of the icons. Then I'm going to go forward by around 1.5 seconds, maybe just around 1 second, and I'm going to add another 3 position keyframes. Then I'll go to the original ones, and I'm just going to move each icon so and then it's further away like so. So and then it's going to be like the triangles like bigger at the start, and then they're going to like move closer together. Then I'll do what I did with the graph like I did earlier. And then I'm going to also keyframe the opacity at the start at 0%. Then I'm going to go forward by like, I don't know, 10 frames, something like that. And then I'm going to make the opacity 100% on all 3 of them as well. So as you can see now, they all like come closer together and it looks really smooth. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start using the null, and a lot of people get confused by nulls, but they're quite simple. So basically follow along with what I'm doing, but to simplify nulls, I basically like and basically what we're going to do for this is, if you see these second set of keyframes for the camera one, if we're going to actually create keyframes on the null, on the position just before that, as you can see like this, we're going to add a position keyframe here and a Z rotation here as well. And then we're going to go forward by around 1 second, maybe 1.5 seconds, and I'm going to basically scale out the position. And as you can see, we're moving the null, but it's having the same effect as the camera. And we're also going to make the Z rotation the opposite of what we did for the camera. So for the camera, it's positive 21, and we're going to make the Z rotation minus 21, and this will revert the grid, like the background, so and then it's straight and it's no longer tilted. And I'm going to highlight these 4 keyframes. I'll press F9. I'll go into the graph editor to create a steep peak, like near the middle, but like slightly to the left, like so. And if I play this back, as you can see, it will basically zoom in and then it will zoom out again even before it's finished zooming in. Then as it's zooming out, I also want to make the icons disappear. So I'm going to go to the point where I want them to be like disappearing, and then I'll add 3 opacity keyframes. Then I'll go back by like maybe like 5 or 6 keyframes, and then I'm just going to add another 3 keyframes, and then I'll actually move them forward a bit, and then I'm going to make the final set of keyframes 0%, and then now it will like fade out like so. And actually I'm going to move these 3 set of keyframes closer to the start, and I'll adjust the keyframes. Then I'm going to go up to the top and get the text tool, and I'm going to type up "so addictive?" in the Bebes font, and I'm going to add that below the null, and I'm going to scale that down and position that where I want it to be. And I'm going to highlight the word "so," and I'm going to make that white, and the word "addictive" will be in yellow. Then I'm going to add the glow effect onto that, and I'm going to increase the radius and decrease the intensity to like 0.8. Then I'm going to make it start around 1 second in, and then I'm going to open up Animation Composer 3, which is a free extension by Mr. Horse. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with this company. It's just useful to have this to create like pre-made transitions and effects. So I'm going to open that up. You don't actually need to use this. You can use like the typewriter effect in After Effects to get a very similar look, and typewriter is inbuilt in After Effects, and you can make this with like just keyframing inbuilt effects. But because I've already got Animation Composer 3 installed, I'm just going to use it. So I'll go to Starter Presets, Transitions Text Layer, and I'm going to add Scale Characters 1 onto this. And then I'm just going to move the marker closer to the start. And if we play this back, as you can see, like it has that kind of like wave transition. And yeah, you need to make sure this is 3D, because now we're going to move the third position value, so then it's closer to the camera. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to play around with it, because we've basically zoomed out the camera for this. What we're going to do is we're going to make it so, and then at the start of the movement you can't see the "so addictive" text, and then at the end it will pop into view. So we're basically going to position it so, and then it's basically just on that border. So, and then like as it zooms out, you can see it. I shall make it a bit further away from the camera again, because I want to line it exactly up with when it says "so addictive." That's when I want the text to come in. But as you can see, the text is really big, but we can't like zoom it out further away from the camera, because it will lose the whole like zooming out effect. So what we need to do instead is we can just press S to open up the scale, and we can just scale down the text, so and then it's much smaller, and then it will be the size of what we want it to be, but and then it will be in the position we want it to be. So and then it will zoom out, but and then it won't be too big, so and then we can actually like see the text, and it has the same effect. And as you can see, when we play this back, it comes from behind the camera, and it has that zoom out effect, but the text is actually the correct size, and it's not too big. And actually I've noticed that there is a big gap in the voiceover between where it says like "so addictive" and then the next part. So I'm just going to trim it, so and then the actual gap in between it is smaller.
Addictive.
So yeah, I want it to be like I want it to be so addictive and then instantly go into the next bit, so and then there's no pause, so and then I can just zoom right out again.
So addictive.
Then when I want the third camera movement, I'm going to make a position keyframe, which is around 3 seconds in, just before the second one finishes. But this time I'm going to do it with the camera 1. So as you can see, the keyframes go from camera 1, and then it swaps to null 1, and then we're going back to camera 1, and then after we'll go to null 1. And these two just allow each other to basically move the next bit before the original movement was actually finished. So it really allows you to have that flow. Then I'm going to go forward by a couple seconds, and I'm just going to change the third position value, so and then it's scaled out. Then I'm also going to just play around with the position keyframes like so, and I'm going to highlight the 2 keyframes, and I'm going to go into the graph editor to create a steep peak to the left of the middle. So as you can see, it zooms out, and I shall just play around with the position keyframes. I'll move them closer to each other, and then move them closer to the start as well. And I shall go back into the graph editor, and I'll make this peak a bit closer to the middle, and I'll make it a bit steeper actually as well. And yeah, I quite like this. This looks quite smooth. Then I'm going to add the Instagram logo again. So I'm going to then like scale this down, and I'll make it 3D. Then I'm going to make it like closer to the camera, and this one is going to be in front of the so addictive text. So also a quick tip is if you want, you can hold shift on your like keyboard, and then when you drag the position, it will move a lot faster, because as you can see, it's at -8,000. So what you want to do then is you want to just play around with the position, so and then it zooms out correctly like we did for the so addictive text. So we're basically just going to keep playing around with the third position value until it's like zooms out as well. And then when I'm happy with that, I'm just then going to decrease the scale, and we'll see how that looks. So as you can see, yeah, it zooms out perfectly like so. Then I'm going to add the glow effect onto this logo, and I'll increase the radius to like 1000, and I'll make it the intensity 0.7. Actually, I'll decrease the radius a bit as well. Then when I want the next movements to start, which is around 2.5 seconds in, I'm then going to keyframe the position of the null one. Then I'm going to go forward by around a second or so, and I am going to move. I'm basically going to zoom out, and I'm going to move to the left at this, move to the right at the same time. Then I'm going to play around with this graph until it looks a bit smoother, like so. Then I'm also just going to play around with the keyframes a bit as well. And I've also noticed that my like spotlight overlay has run out, and basically, so what I'll do to make it keep going, I could slow it down, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to move this one over here, and I'm going to right click on it, go to time, and then time reverse layer, and then I'll match that up with the end of the cut, so and then it basically just keeps going, and then in reverse, so and then it doesn't restart it, and there isn't an obvious cut. Then I'm going to, like for the programmers bit of the script, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import this AI picture I found on FreePic. All credit goes to them. Again, you can find the link to this in the description below. It will be in the assets, and I'll also link the actual like picture as well. So I'll make this 3D, and then I'll move this closer to the camera as well. I'll move it so and then it's above the Instagram logo as well. So now this is going to be really close to the camera, as you can see. Again, I'm just going to play around with it. So and then basically it pops into view like so, and then it's basically like in front of everything, and then when we zoom out like we did, it will pop back into view like we've done twice in this video already. As you can see, it pops into view as we zoom out. But also because we are moving to the right side of the screen, then we also need to position it on the right side of the screen as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease the scale of it, but because we're so zoomed out now, like we basically, as you can see, it's huge, but we pretty much need to go to very, very small scale numbers to actually make it fit the screen. Because it's so close to the camera, it's also become like the movement isn't so smooth. I think I have a theory for why this is, but it's quite complicated, so I won't even go into it. But one of the ways you can fix this is basically just try and make it as far away from the camera as possible while still being like doing the movement you want it to do. So I'm just going to keep moving this picture further away from the camera until it is like smoother, because when I play this back, as you can see, that's already a bit smoother. I'll make it even further away from the camera. I'll play it back again, and as you can see, it's going to get a bit smoother and smoother and smoother. So I'll move it back even more, and as you can see, this is like a lot smoother, but I'll move it back even more because it's just still not enough. So as you can see now, the movement is smooth. So we'll then scale this up. So then it's actually not 2%, it's more reasonable, like 30. And then we'll position it where we want it to be. It's not really in front of the Instagram logo anymore, but it doesn't need to be because we're going to be moving to the right side of the screen. But if you needed it to be in front, then yeah, it would need to be really close to the camera. But we're going to go to the point where it's just about to cover the screen, like the picture, and we're going to keyframe the opacity at 0%, like when it's basically on the edge, the picture is on the edge of the screen, and then we'll increase the opacity to 100%. And as you can see, when we play this back, it looks quite smooth, and it's transitioning in well. I'll space out the keyframes a bit as well to make it even smoother though. And actually, there is a bit of a gap in the voiceover as well in between this, and I need it to quickly move on, so I'll close this gap, so and then it moves on faster.
In progress.
Then I'm going to make a position keyframe around 3.5 seconds in, and then I'm going to go forward again by around a second, and I'll zoom in a bit, and then I'm going to play around with the graph, so and then there's a steep peak near the middle, and as you can see, it transition in, then zooms in. Then I'm going to add the tritone effect onto this picture, and this is basically going to tint the picture a certain color. Right now it's brown. I don't really like it for this one, so I'm going to change it to a like turquoise color. Then I'm going to get the text tool and I'm going to type up in the same font, software developers. Then I'm going to make the text 3D. I'll position it below the null and I'll make it closer to the camera. So then it's now in front of the picture a bit, only by a tiny amount. And then I'll basically change the scale. So and then it is now in shot and where it is positioned where I want it to be. Then I'm going to highlight the word developers and I'll change that to yellow. And then I'll add the glow effect onto this text as well. And I'll increase the radius to around 90, 100. And I'll add also the drop shadow effect onto this text as well. And then I'll increase the softness to like 70, something like that. So now it looks like the text is tracked onto the picture. But what I'll do is I'll basically track the opacity with the actual picture. So now I'll add a 0% and 100% keyframes where the picture has its 0% and 100% opacity keyframes as well. So I'll match it. And actually I'll make it start where I want it to start. Like I'll make it start exactly the point where the picture starts, because I'm going to add a transition onto this. So then I'm going to match up the opacity keyframes again. And actually I've just realized, to be fair, like I actually want the text to come in when he says software developers, not when the picture comes in. So I will actually go into Animation Composer 3 and I'm going to go to Starter Presets, Text Layer, and I'm going to add scale characters 2 this time. And I'm going to make the like banner thing start closer to the start. Actually, I'm just going to play around with the overall positioning of the text. So then it starts when he says software developers. I'm also going to remove the opacity keyframes from the text as well. So now the picture comes in and it says software developers when it actually says the word.
Software developers in program.
Then around 4.5 seconds in, I'm going to add another position keyframe for the null. So then I'm going to go forward by around a second. And I'm basically going to zoom everything out and then move it to the right as well. Then I'm going to go into the graph editor, and with the 2 keyframes, I'll just make the steep peak in the middle. So and then the movement's a lot smoother. Actually, I'll make the peak a bit steeper as well. Then I'm going to add my second picture in. So I'm going to make it 3D, then I'm going to make it closer to the camera, so and then it's in front of the text. And I'm just going to scale it down and position it where I want it to be. Then I'm going to copy the tritone effect from the first picture and I'll paste that onto the second one so they both have that turquoise look. But as you can see, the camera movement's a bit off, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it closer to the camera, the picture. And this means it starts off that you can't see the picture, and then as we zoom to the right and we move up, like we move, further away from the picture, the camera moves, we're basically the second picture will pop into view like so. But it doesn't really look that smooth, so we're just going to play around with the position as well until it looks a lot smoother. And when I'm happy with it, I'm also going to decrease the scale and put it where I want it to be. So then the subject is in the middle of the screen. And we'll play that back to see how that looks. And then like we did earlier, when the edge of the picture lines up with the left side of the screen, so then it just covers the screen, I'm going to keyframe the opacity at 0%. Then I'm going to go forward by like 10 frames and I'll make the opacity 100%. And as you can see, it now transitions in. But I'm not a big fan of how it's transitioning in, to be fair. It needs to transition in a bit sooner to like match the like peak of the movement for the camera. So I'm basically going to move the actual like picture further away from the camera. And as you can see, it looks a bit better now, but we're gonna then match it to the rest of the screen. But we'll also play around with the opacity keyframes a bit as well. And as you can see, that looks a lot smoother than it did before. And just after that, I'm going to add another position keyframe for the camera. And then I'm going to go forward by around a second or so. And then I'm going to zoom out a lot as well. But as you can see, we've reached the end of everything. Like we've reached the end of the picture and we can see like everything behind it. So to fix this, I'm going to search up in the effects and presets motion tile, and I'll add this motion tile effect onto this picture, then increase the output height, and then I'm going to click mirror edges. And as you can see now, it's basically like filling the rest of the screen with like a mirrored version of the image. And this just saves us from having to like scale up the image and then be really, really zoomed in. Then with these two position keyframes, I'm just going to then play around with the graph until it looks smooth as well. So I'm going to create a steep peak like to the left side of the middle. Then I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm going to position this below the null, and I'll make this 3D. And then I'm going to go to where like the movement finishes with the camera, and I'm basically going to move this black solid closer to the camera as well. And I'll make it so, and then it's in front of the picture. So, and then we're going to create the same effect. So, and then it will zoom out from the second turquoise picture, and then it's going to then transition. So, and then the black solid like appears into the screen like we did for the Instagram logo as well. So we will just have to play around with the third position value a lot as well, just so and then we get that look. Then I'm going to add this spotlight, the same spotlight overlay onto this over the black solid. I'll make it 3D, and I'll do the same thing with this one as well. So and then we'll basically change the position and position it so and then it's exactly on the same point as the black solid. But as you can see, now we're so close to the camera, we're literally having to go to like less than 1% of the scale. Like we're at 1% of like the scale, and it's this big. So it just shows how like small we're gonna have to go to actually make this fit to the screen. So I'll make it actually 0.1. Actually, I'll make it 0.05. And it's still bigger, but that'll do, I think, for now. And we'll also change the opacity of the spotlight to 25. We're basically going to be creating the same background we did at the start. So we're going to have the black solid, then the grid, then the spotlight. So then we're just going to scale it down, and we'll change the rotation to 90. So, and then it's also like upright. But we'll just play around with the actual positioning and scale. So, and then it basically matches the rest of it. We'll actually have to move it even closer. And as you can see now, it's how it was. We'll have to make this scale even smaller. And yeah, as you can see now, we're basically just creating the same background we made earlier, but we're just creating it much, much, much closer to the camera. So the values are much smaller as well. But now I'm happy with that. I'm just going to add the tint effect onto the grid like we did earlier. I'll map black to white, and I'll map white to black. Then I'll change the opacity to like, I don't know, 10%, something like that. And we'll also move the spotlight above the grid. And as you can see, we have the same background we had earlier as well. But we're also going to scale up the adjustment layer we made at the start, the one with the vignette. And that means it will cover the rest of the movement. But I also do want like a new vignette adjustment layer, because I want a different value. So, and then because the one I want for the start, I don't want for this, I want like a different intensity. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. I'm going to make it start exactly where the pictures, the AI pictures transition in. And I'll add a vignette onto this adjustment layer. I'll change the amount to like 140, and I'll keyframe the opacity at 0% when the picture starts to fade in, and I'll go to the second opacity keyframe for that picture. And then I'll make the opacity of this adjustment layer 100% as well. And as you can see, now we have a stronger vignette on the rest of this. But I've gone to the end where the old background was, and it's just no longer there. But the thing is, what it's done is it's moved, for some reason, it's moved it so far away. So now it's like way, way, way smaller. So I'm going to have to scale that up, so and then it matches the rest of the composition. And the thing is, this has kind of saved me actually, because I don't know what's happened. I don't know why this has created this. But the thing is, now we don't have to have these extremely small numbers, which are just annoying to work with. So it's basic, After Effects has basically saved me here. But I don't know if this would do the same for you if you're following along. So if it didn't do this for you, if it didn't like make them more normal size, then I guess you just have to keep working with the tiny sizes. But at the same time, for me, for some reason, it's kind of like worked in my favor. And as you can see, when we scale out from the second picture, it now shows this like background that we had at the start again, but now we've got it here. Then I'm going to import this dollar bill picture, and I'm going to play around with the positioning of it. So, and then it's in front of the background. So now I'm going to basically move the position to like minus 10,000 or something like that. And I'm then going to scale it down, so then it's reasonable size as well. Then I'm going to move it forward in time, so then it like appears in straight away. And then I'm also going to duplicate this money icon. Like I'm going to duplicate it twice, so then there's 3 layers. And then I'm going to highlight the bottom 2 layers, like we'll leave the top one. And then I'm going to keyframe the Z rotation. and then also the position just after it's like transitioned in, the dollar bill is transitioned in. Then I'm going to go forward by around a second, second and a half. And then I'm going to highlight these two layers. I'll press U to show the keyframes we've made. So as you can see, we've got 4 keyframes here. Around, a second or so after, I'm then going to play around with the Z rotation of one of the bills, and I'll position it to the right. And I'll also play around with the position, so and then it's like this. And I'll do the same thing with the bill on the left. Then to make it smoother, we're going to highlight these 8 keyframes. We're going to press F9, we'll go into the graph editor, then we'll highlight like the graph, like the bottom bit. And this means when we now move it to create a steep peak in the middle like so, all of them will move together. As you can see now, it transitions in quite smoothly, but we'll just spread out the keyframes a bit, so and then the movement takes a bit longer to zoom in, and we'll actually make the whole thing start more forward in time as well. I also want to create another zoom in effect as the dollar bills reveal themselves like we did for the first AI picture. So I'm going to keyframe the null one like at the same point as when the dollar bill transition starts, and then I'm going to go to the second set of keyframes for the dollar bills, and I'm just going to move the camera closer to the dollar bills so they appear bigger. And what I'll do is I'll highlight the dollar bill keyframes, and I'll line my blue line up with the peak of it. Then I'm going to go to the null one, and I'm basically going to change the graph, so and then the peak for that null one is exactly where the line is, so and then basically it will zoom in at the same pace as the dollar bills spread out in a way. Then I'm going to search up in the effects and presets glow, and I'll add this onto the dollar bills. I'll add it onto one of them. I'll increase the radius to the max, and I'm going to decrease the glow intensity to around 0.7. Then I'm going to copy that one, and I'll add that onto the other 2 dollar bills as well. But the glow is really bright, so I'm going to actually decrease the glow intensity to around 0.5 for all 3 of them as well. And yeah, that looks a lot better in my opinion. And the thing is, I actually want the background to not be the exact same as it was at the start, because right now it's pretty much the exact same. And so what I'm going to do to make it look different is I'm going to search up in the effects and presets tint, and I'm going to add the tint onto the spotlight overlay. And I'm going to basically map the white to a blue color, so then it makes it look different. But I'll play around with the opacity of the grid and the spotlight, so and then it looks like the blue is more visible as well. Then I'm also going to create a new solid, and I'm going to add that above the money icons. I'm going to make it 3D, and I'll position it so and then it's in front of the money icons as well. I want the solid to be this blue color, so I'm going to search up in the effects and presets fill, and I'm going to add that onto the solid. Then I'm going to change the red to a blue color, and then I'm going to change the actual opacity to around 10%, and this will give like the whole thing this blue overlay. And also to make the transition just a bit smoother, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the exact point where it changes from the picture to the like the new background and everything, and I'm going to keyframe the opacity of every single one of the new layers we've created, so the black solid all the way up to the other black solid. So basically the everything related to this new layer, so the money icons, the spotlight overlay, the grid, like the new background we've created, essentially all of those layers. And I'll press T to open up the opacity, and I'll keyframe the opacity at that point. Then I'm going to go forward by around 6 frames, and I'll add another set of opacity keyframes. Then I'll go back to the original set, and I'll make the opacity on all of the layers we've just selected to 0%. So now it will transition in just a bit smoother, but I'll just space out the keyframes just a bit as well. I'll make it a bit forward in time, and I'll also space out the keyframes, like the 2 keyframes, I'll make them further away from each other as well. And as you can see now, it's just this very subtle transition, which is just a bit better than having it just instantly appear. Then around 7 seconds in, I'm going to add another position keyframe on the camera 1. Then I'm going to go forward by around 1.5 seconds, and I'm basically going to move everything to the left. But because of the angle, basically what's happened is because the angle of the camera is still set to 21, and we can't just move it back or it will just instantly it will look really off. So we have to kind of work with the angle, I guess. And when we've moved it, it's now created that angled movement instead of just the straight left to right. So what we're going to do to make that more straight is we're going to play around with the second value as well as the first to make to basically move everything down a bit. And as you can see, it's still tilting up a bit, so we're going to move it down even more. And the goal is just to make it move from right to left in a straight way. And when we're happy with that, I'm going to play around with the graph of these two keyframes, and I'll make a peak near the start. Then I'm going to import this picture of this girl looking at a phone, and I'm just going to make the picture 3D, and I'll make it so and then it's in front of the already existing layers. But I have just noticed that we haven't actually added a motion tile effect onto this background like we did for the other one. So basically, as you can see, we've run out of background almost, and you can see that gap there where it's grey. So what we're going to do to not have that and make it so and then it carries on going for ages, search up in the effects and presets motion tile, and I'm going to add that onto one of the layers, so the grid background. And I'll change the output width to 300 and the output height to 300 as well. Then I'll copy that and I'll add it onto all of the background layers. But you can actually notice the change. So what I'm gonna do to fix that is I'm just going to click mirror edges on all of the motion tile ones as well, and this should fix the thing and make it so and then it looks like the background is carrying on. Then I'm going to move the picture of the girl closer to the camera, and I'm just going to position the picture so and then it's on the left side, so and then when the camera moves from right to left, that picture is visible. But because we're so close to the camera, it's absolutely massive, so we're just going to scale it down to 1%, maybe 2 or 3 actually, and then I'm just going to position it where I want it to be. And I'm going to add the tritone effect onto this picture as well, but I'm actually going to leave the default settings because I actually like that brownish orange look. And as you can see, it will now go from right to left, and the picture will transition in. So we're going to go to the exact point where the picture fully covers the screen. So and then the edge of the picture is just in line with the right side of the screen. And I'm going to keyframe the opacity at 0%. Then I'm going to go forward by around 10 frames, and I'm going to make the opacity 100%. But the thing is, we've also run out of background again because I didn't do it enough, so I'll change the output width of all of them to 300. So I'll do that for all of them. So every single one of the background layers I'll make from 270 or whatever it was to 300, because it needs to be just a bit bigger, so and then we don't see the edge of the background. And then, yeah, as you can see now, that looks pretty good. You can't see the edge of the background. And as you can see, it transitions in quite smoothly. I'll probably play around with the positioning a bit as well, actually. So yeah, I'll move the picture of the girl further away from the screen. So, and then it's the movement is a bit smoother. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. But what I'm going to also do is I'm going to play around with the actual graph for the movement as well. So I'll make that a bit steeper. And as you can see now, the movement's a bit steeper and it looks a bit smoother as well. I'll make it even a bit steeper as well. And I'll play around with the position keyframes a bit as well. As you can tell, a lot of this is just playing around with stuff, to be honest. And yeah, that looks really smooth in my opinion now. I do really like that. Now I'm happy with that. I'm going to add another picture of someone on their phone. So I'm going to import this picture of this girl on her phone as well. Then I'll move the picture closer to the camera, so then it's in front of the original picture. Then I'm just going to scale it down to 1 or 2 or 3%, just so and then it's matches the screen. We'll just add it in the middle as well, like that. And we'll just play around with when the actual second picture comes in. And now I'm happy with the positioning of that. I'm going to import the third picture, and this is just a picture of the same thing, but this time it's a boy. And then I'm going to scale this picture closer to the screen, and I'm just going to decrease the scale of it as well. Actually, I'll make it even closer because that's still not enough. And I'll just make that picture in front of the second picture as well. And I'll position it where I want it to be. And as you can see, it will go from first picture to second picture to third picture. Now we're going to move on to the last actual part of the video, the last I guess scene of the video. And this is the bit with the time, like this is going to be the bit with the clock going around. So we're going to basically, I don't really want to keep zooming out and zooming out and zooming out because it's just too much in the sense that like the scale is just messed up now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically like create a new, just like a new camera and everything. And the way we can do this, the easiest way to do it is essentially add a transition. So and then you basically can separate the layers without actually noticing the separation. So I'm going to open up Window, then Animation Composer 3, and I'm going to go to Starter Pre-Comps, Transitions, and I'm going to find the digital glitch, and I'm going to add the short one around 9 seconds in and or just about a second after the picture of the boy pops up. Then I'm going to add this below the adjustment layer, and as you can see now we have a glitch. And at this exact point I'm going to create a new solid. I'll add this below the glitch and I'll cut it so then it comes in exactly where the cut of the glitch is as well. And I've also just remembered that I actually do want transitions in between these 3 pictures as well. So I'll go to the exact point where the picture goes from picture 1 to picture 2, and I'll go back into Animation Composer 3, and I'll go back into Starter Pre-Comps, then Transitions, and I'll add the generated light leak 2 transition, and I'll go 5 or 6 frames from the cut, and I'll cut the actual transition. So and then there's 6 frames from the cut instead of like 20 or whatever it is now. So and then the actual flash is a lot sooner. Then I'm going to duplicate this transition, and I'll add this one in between the picture 2 and picture 3. So now there's 2 flash transitions. And as you can see, when we play this back, it flashes twice, and then it will go into the glitch, and then we'll go into the next scene. Then I'm going to copy the tritone effect from the first picture, and I'll add it onto the second and third ones as well. And the last thing I'm going to do before I move on to the last scene is I'm just going to add this like particles overlay, which you can also find in the assets in the description below. And I'll add it below the adjustment layer, but in front of everything else. And I actually won't make this layer 3D because I want it to just be over everything. I don't want to have to play around with the positioning of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it so and then it starts to, like the opacity of it is keyframed at 0% just as the first like AI picture comes in. And then we're going to line it up with the second keyframe of the like AI picture. And then we'll make the opacity of the particles overlay 100%. Then we're also going to scale it up so it fits the rest of the composition. And then we'll toggle switch modes. And then we're going to change the mode to screen. And now it will be an overlay and we won't be able to see the black background and we'll just see the actual particles. But actually we're going to position it so and then it's below the new black solid. I don't want it to apply onto the final scene. And for this scene, I'm going to create the same type of background that I created for basically what we've been doing this whole video. So with the spotlight and the grid, but this one's going to be another blue one instead of a orange or red one like we did at the start. So I'm going to import in the spotlight overlay, and I'm also just going to create a new camera so we don't have to mess around with the weird scaling. Then I'm also going to place this below the adjustment layer. I'm also going to create a new null. I'm not sure if we're even going to need this null, so I don't even think we do, so you don't need to use this, but just in case I want to play around with the stuff and I want to create a second zoom in, I'll add it anyway, just in case. Then I'm going to cut these two when everything else starts, so then you can only see this when there's the cut. And I'm going to add this digital glitch above all of the other layers actually. And I'll turn off the visibility of the glitch by pressing the I, just so then we can we'll add it after, but it's just for now so we can see everything. Then I'm going to import the grid and I'll place it below the spotlight. I'll change the rotation to 90% or 90, and then I'm going to change the opacity of the spotlight to 25% like we did before, and I'll add the tint effect like we did before, and I'll add that onto the grid. And I'll map black to white and white to black. And I'll change the opacity of this to around 15–17%. And I'll add the tint effect onto this spotlight, and I'll map white to blue. And I'll play around with the opacity of the spotlight as well. Then I'm going to import my clock video, and I'm just going to move it forward in times because basically it fades in the whole video. It takes ages to fade in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it so and then it fades in and it's right at the end, but then right at the end it cuts out again. So we're just going to move it so and then the end of our clip is where the end of the clock is as well before it fades out. Then I'm going to add the luma key effect onto this clock, and then we're going to increase the threshold to 24 or something, and this will get rid of the background for us. But then I'll cut the clock so and then it starts where the rest of the layer starts as well. Then I'll make the rest of the layers 3D. Then I'm going to go up to the shape tool here and I'm going to hover over it and I'm going to keep pressing Q until we get the ellipsis tool. Then I'm going to hold shift and draw a perfect circle like so. And the circle is going to have a black fill and no stroke. Then I'm going to make this one below the null as well. And I'm going to change the scale of this one to like 97%, maybe 96. It's just like, this depends on how big you made the original circle. And I'm basically just trying to match it exactly with the edges of the clock. Then I'm also just going to center it. And once we've centered it, then we will make it 3D. Then I'm going to change the opacity of this circle to like 30 or 40%. And I'll cut this layer so then it starts with the rest of the layers as well. Then I'm going to create a new solid and I'll position this below the null too. And then I'm going to search up fill and I'm going to add the fill onto this solid and I'll change the color to blue. Then I'll change the opacity of this to like 10%. So it's basically another like overlay, so it kind of makes everything a bit more blue. Then I'll make this black solid like 3D as well. Then I'm going to keyframe the camera and I'm going to keyframe the position and Z rotation at the start. Then I'm going to go forward by around a second or so and I'll add two more like keyframes. Then I'll go back to the first ones and I'll make it so then it starts really zoomed in and I'll make it tilted a bit as well. Then with these 4 position keyframes, I'll highlight them, I'll press F9. Then I'm going to go into the graph editor and I'm going to create a steep peak right at the start like so. And as you can see now, it like zooms out in a really smooth way and it tilts around as well. Then I'm going to turn on the visibility of the digital glitch again. Then I'm going to search up in the effects and presets glow and I'm going to add the glow effect onto the clock and this will make the clock look a lot better. Then the last thing I'm going to do, like the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to improve the transition of the like where the picture, the first AI picture transitions to the second one because it's been bugging me because it's just not that smooth and it kind of annoys me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play around with this. And now once I've done that, this is the finished reel.
Why is social media so addictive? Social media companies pay software developers and programmers huge amounts of money to keep you hooked on their platform.
Just a quick
for as
reminder
long as
about
possible.
Skillcut. If you are a beginner or intermediate video editor looking to level up and edit like a professional as soon as possible, then I would highly recommend that you check out Skillcut through the top link in the description below.